Parisian Parenting. Why are French children so well behaved? Parisian parents often take on a culture very Victorian in nature, meaning they are not the warm and emotionally present culture that is presented in the United States. Although they are not demonstrative emotionally, they choose to show their love in other ways, primarily through quality time and experimental learning. Parisians can often be found teaching their children through projects that allow the child to become a more forward and practical thinker. Many parents tend to use baby talk, a kind of cutesy, simplified speech when talking to their babies. This oversimplification of speech will carry over into a child's developmental years and will come out when the child begins to speak. Parents usually use very basic speech when addressing their children, for fear of saying something too difficult for them to understand. But the French don't believe in baby talk. They believe that a child who speaks in logical sentence is easier to understand and that children should be taught to speak clearly as soon as possible. Thus, they are shown to have more intellectual conversation at an early age. Parisians believe that using full sentences and a larger vocabulary when addressing children will teach them how to properly form sentences of their own. In the United States, children usually learn please and thank you. However, according to Bringing Up Bibi, a book that describes in detail the aforementioned Parisian methods, Arthur Duckerman writes, the French children learn s'il vous plaît, merci, bonjour, and au revoir. While we may think in America that we are being polite and greeting people, it is essential in France. It's important to the French to say bonjour because it acknowledges the other person's humanity, something that most children in America are not taught to do until much later in life. Children in the United States are not held to the same standard of politeness that is expected of adults. A 4-year-old child is not obligated to greet others. Instead, the child is frequently excused because of age or maturity. The child is given a choice to lurk under the umbrella of his parents' greeting, again, a behavior that would not be allowed for French children. What we may consider status quo in America would either be inappropriate or unacceptable for not just the French, but for many European nations and their children. We may think, I don't need this child's acknowledgments because I don't quite count him as a full person. He's in a separate kids realm. How many times have you heard, they need to sit at the kids' table while attending a friend's dinner party? The Parisians think a little differently. Just as adults greet one another, children must also acknowledge adults and other peers their own age. Greeting others is recognizing someone as a whole person, adult and child alike. If a French child is not greeted, they will feel offended and consider it rude that they were not acknowledged. Parisians believe that good manners are part of teaching children the value of patience as well as common courtesy. Patience is not only a valuable life skill in general, but will prevent meltdowns in waiting rooms, restaurants, and other places where instant gratification is not an option. Tantrums are considered unacceptable in France, as children are expected to be reasonable just as adults are. Parisian children are taught from a young age to properly use silverware and eat from adult plates, such as china. They even start using metal silverware in daycare. In America, there is no standard in raising children with table manners. In fact, I don't believe it would be far-fetched to say that there has been a decline in the manners exhibited in most homes and restaurants. This is in large part due to the disintegration of the importance of a nuclear family unit in America. Metal silverware is considered dangerous, and mom needs to be around to ensure the child doesn't hurt himself. France often observe a 4-course menu each day at their longest mealtime, starting with a vegetable dish and then progressing to a main course. There's a different cheese every day so that the child will experience diversity in the diet as well. Vegetables are served at the beginning of the meal when children are hungriest, which ensures they will have an additional incentive to eat them, creating a love and a desire for healthy foods as the child grows. Once French children are old enough to safely eat non-mashed, solid foods, they begin eating exactly the same dishes as their parents. This is due to the belief that eating is a skill and one that should be perfected at an early age. French parents believe it is their job to teach their child how to appreciate food and develop a good food vocabulary to help the child understand their own palates. Children's menus are not common in France. According to the book, French Kids Eat Everything, there is very little distinction between what might appear on a parent or child's plate. Children are given strong, mature flavors from a young age. Think Roquefort cheese and pâté. This gives them time to develop a taste for rich food. In America, it is common to think that a new baby means weeks or even months of sleepless nights for parents. But for the French, they see things differently. They believe that healthy, well-fed babies must be taught to sleep through the night within the first 2 months. How can a parent teach their infant to sleep through the night? Mainly by not inserting themselves unnecessarily into the child's routine. They are there to guide, but not interfere. French parents use something called the 2-minute pause phase. This is a technique in which parents wait a few minutes before tending to their child if they hear them start to cry. This gives them a chance to self-soothe. One reason for pausing is that young babies make a lot of movement and noise when they're sleeping. This is normal and fine. If parents rush in and pick the baby up every time he makes a peep, they will sometimes wake him. Over time, this can train babies to sleep through the night on their own. While raising tiny adults may seem a bit unorthodox and feel as if it goes against the normal parenting instincts, pediatric experts explain that babies have 2-hour sleep cycles, and the 2-minute pause teaches them to link these sleep cycles together. If a parent immediately sees to the baby whenever the baby cries at night in between these cycles, the harder it will be for the baby to learn how to connect the cycles together. What may even make things worse is that the baby will now become dependent on an adult to soothe him or her back to sleep. French parents establish clear expectations of what is expected and what is unacceptable behavior from their children at a very early age. This creates an authoritative parenting style and leaves little question as to who's in charge in the family. French children, unlike many of their American counterparts, do not need to be entertained constantly by their parents. Some might see this scenario as evidence that the French are less thrilled with having children and are more selfish as parents than their American counterparts who are constantly playing with their children. In Paris, children follow the adult schedules on the weekend. In America, we tend to pack our schedules and center them on kids' activities. The Parisian mother values their free time without the guilt of leaving their children. They teach their children early on that mom and dad have needs as well, and they will be taken care of. The Parisians acknowledge that the parents were there before the child. French parenting is based on the concept that the child is to fit into the existing parent's life. In conclusion, what can the Parisian way of parenting teach us, and how can we convert these ideas? The French parenting style seems to waver between being extremely strict and shockingly permissive. They enforce a framework of meticulous expectations, stressing patience and concern for parents' needs. But looking more closely, the French view is really one of balance. They stress it's very important that no part of your life, not being a mom, not being a worker, not being a wife, overwhelms the other part.